Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Access Vikings podcast. I'm Emily Leiker, joined by my Minnesota Star Tribune colleagues Ben Goessling and Andrew Krammer, and we are recapping what was a Vikings loss in Dublin, 24-21 against the Steelers. They came close to mounting the fourth quarter comeback, but ultimately couldn't quite get there. And Ben, I mean, we were just talking about it before we got on. Like they really tried to get there in those closing moments, and it created some chaos, a little excitement probably out there for the league's first game in Dublin. But just kind of like, what was your overall takeaway of this game and what that audience out there was provided in seeing it?
Well, it was one that had a lot of twists and turns, and I mean, you had everything from the fact that the play clock was not in the normal spot for Carson Wentz to see it at the end of the game, to Wentz getting poked in the eye before halftime, and I don't think was able to see terribly well in that series. In fact, Kevin O'Connell said that there were a couple of throws that he thought Wentz having something or getting poked in the eye affected his ability to make those throws, and that comes after Justin Jefferson slips and doesn't score on that series. So there's a lot of things that are just different in playing in these games. No matter how much the NFL tries to make it seem normal and exactly the same as you'd want at home, or the same routine you'd want at home, it's just hard to do it all. So you're going to have some of those things come up in these games, and they're not going away. They're not slowing down. But this one did have a few wrinkles to it because of where it was being played that I think probably hurt the Vikings, and which is interesting because a lot of the reason they were like, yeah, we're good with doing this is they've managed international games well for the most part. I mean, you're still going to have some things go wrong. I mean, they've had that certainly before with Lewis Cine in 2022 and, different things over the years that just come up. But, I think they figured this is going to be something a little closer to a neutral site environment. I don't know how well it came through on TV, but it did not feel neutral site. It felt like a Pittsburgh home game where some Vikings fans would travel to, which is, you see that quite a bit. But it was loud, and I think it was probably as juiced of an atmosphere. This is the fifth one of these I've covered internationally, and they get a little bit better. They've gotten better over the years, but this one was the most, Justin Jefferson called it electric, and I would agree with that. I think towards the end of the game, you had people on their feet screaming for that last series. The noise felt like they were in Pittsburgh in a lot of ways, and that part was cool. And I think if it was going to be like that, there may be some part where they'd say, well, if it was going to be that loud and that hostile an environment, at least we know where the play clock's going to be in Pittsburgh. So I don't know that you'll get anybody to say that publicly, but I wonder if some people would be thinking that a little bit.
Oh, yeah, Ben, watching it from home and watching O'Connell's press conference from home, I found it funny that he mentioned at the end, he was asked by, I think, a Dublin media member, just was the noise a factor? And he said, well, not as much as the play clock, or he basically deferred and said, that play clock was absolutely a factor. So you bringing that up and talking about it, it was not brought up on the broadcast. So we didn't really know it was much of an issue. And that's a huge factor. Yeah, no, it really wasn't. So that's a huge factor. And then, the turf slipping, and frankly, just the uncharacteristic mistakes on defense, the missed tackles, Harrison Smith starting off on DK Metcalf, and obviously Kenneth Gainwell just running for nearly 100 yards and 2 scores. So it seemed like the things the Vikings hang their hat on did not travel as well this time around.
No, and one of the things they've had to hang their hat on, unfortunately for them, is offensive line depth.
Yeah,
and they're going to have to do it again. I mean, that got to the other, and we probably buried the lead a little bit here. Yeah. Brian O'Neill getting an MRI tomorrow for a possible MCL injury after he leaves the game in the first half. Ryan Kelly leaves with his second concussion of the year, his fifth of his career. And there was a point at which Michael Juergens was in the medical tent. This was during a TV timeout, so I don't know. This probably didn't come through, but Juergens was in the medical tent. So there was a point that it looked like going to put Blake Brandel at center and then have Joe Huber come in at left guard. So it's like, if you're scoring at home, we are now down to second and third string players on 3 of the 5 spots on the offensive line. So, that is probably the big thing going forward from this game that they're going to have to deal with. But yes, the offensive line injuries added another wrinkle to this one today that it's been a theme, but it's going to continue to be a problem.
Yeah, and I don't know about you guys. I thought that's what obviously undercut their chances to finish this comeback. It what could have been a 7th sack, but was the intentional grounding at the end was just a critical spot. And it seemed like Carson was, I don't know what it looked like in person, Ben, but it seemed like Carson was running or at least trying to throw for his life in a mere matter of seconds.
Yeah, he was on that play. It looked, I mean, he backed up a long way. It looked like it was going to be something where if he takes a sack, it's going to take them into a 3rd and long situation anyway. So the grounding penalty ends up being, kind of effectively the same thing. I mean, it basically makes it the same as the sack, which is the idea of that penalty. But then it makes it so that when they make the completion, you're not able to, I mean, you spike the ball and then now it's 4th down all of a sudden. And then that delay of game that happened at the end, that was where the play clock became the issue, because they announced right before the game, I think that they made an announcement about this in the stadium. I couldn't quite hear it, but O'Connell mentioned afterwards they found out 3 minutes before the game that the play clock and the game clock were going to be turned off. I think the issue, if I heard it correctly, and it's possible I didn't, but that those weren't synced up everywhere. So I think they said, let's just not put them up there and make them seem, you don't want to give the impression that a clock is reliable when it's not. So I think they said, let's just not do it. Let's forget about it and not have these clocks be the factor. But what that then meant is the play clock that you're staring at, or that the quarterbacks are staring at, was on the ribbon boards, which the NFL put in for this game. That Croke Park does not typically have ribbon boards, but so they had those, the play clock up there. So Carson Wentz said afterwards, I was looking over my shoulder all day and I haven't looked behind me to see where the clock is. Because typically, as you know, but for viewers that may not be able to quite think of this, there's always a play clock. It's kind of underneath the goalpost. It's usually in the facing of kind of the what am I trying to say? The mat that aligns the wall in the end zone. So it's typically, if you're a quarterback, you can stare right through the middle of the defense and you can look down the end of the field and see, okay, the play clock's here. Oh, it's at 8. We got to go. Those kinds of things are second nature for a quarterback, but that was not there today because it was turned off. So when they're going through it at the end, and O'Connell did one of these, and people can see my hand, and this means reset the play clock, because it was after the spike. And I wonder if, and he didn't quite say it this way, but it seemed like he wanted the umpire or wanted the play clock reset up to the umpire spot of the ball. And Wentz was pointing to the end zone, basically saying, that play clock's not there, so I'm all screwed up. And they were trying to get a play in that probably had a lot of details. And O'Connell said this, and that's been a problem. But, hey, we need extra protections here if they come here, and, all of those kinds of things make it more elaborate and more detailed than they had time to pull off. But yes, that was what caused that delay of game at the end, and then knocked them back another 5 yards, when every yard at that point is pretty critical to trying to get in field goal range.
So like we've mentioned, obviously, right, first game in Dublin, there's always hiccups to work out with these international trips. I think Andrew and I picked up on some of them a little bit just from watching at home. I mean, we talked in our communication channel during the game about no replays and just kind of some confusing things. But like, what was it like from that regard, the more maybe technical regards on the ground there, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the play clock stuff, which was a big factor in it. But yeah, I mean, the replay stuff becomes a factor, and I would be curious to know if they had the same number of cameras that they have for a normal game, because the reason this becomes a factor in the actual playing of the game is the number of cameras you have dictates the angles you get for challenges and replays, because you're going off what the broadcast crew has. So in other words, if it's a Sunday night game where NBC has, brought everything and, everything is done to the nines, teams actually have a better set of angles to look at replays from than they would for your typical noon game that's, a regional broadcast on Fox or something. So for these, I'm not sure if the camera crew ends up being the same. I would think that, NFL Network produced the game, so I would think that they probably bring camera crews over from the U.S., but I don't know that for sure. I just those things do become factors. There were very few replays being shown in the stadium, and I think you guys said that was the case in the broadcast too. So those things do play a factor in the actual game, not just the broadcast, because teams rely on those cameras. So you had some of that. Aaron Rodgers said he thought the field was pristine. I actually walked across it before the game. It felt fine to me, but I'm not trying to cut in cleats. And in that play before halftime where Justin Jefferson goes down because he's trying to make a cut, he had one man to beat for a touchdown, and he thinks he scores if he doesn't slip. And then that's the sequence where Carson Wentz gets poked in the eye. They have to call a timeout and attend him on the field. I wondered if he was going to have to come out of the game for a play, but he stayed in. I don't know if they showed this on TV either, but between every play on that series, he's taken a towel up to his eye. And I figured, oh, is he bleeding or something? But there were a lot of throws on that drive where, I mean, the last one almost looks like a pop fly. I wonder, it was his left eye. So when he's dropping back, it's his front eye. Kevin O'Connell said the throw to Hawkinson, I think during that sequence, he thought it affected him. So Jefferson not scoring, maybe or maybe not because of the field. It's certainly not the first time we've seen Justin Jefferson slip on a field. But that had a factor in the game too. So there were a number of things that just, little curveballs you deal with. And it just makes you wonder a little bit. I mean, the NFL, like we said, is not slowing this down. This is going to continue to get bigger. And in London, I mean, Andrew and I are making the shift change this week. I'm in Dublin. He's in London next week. So he'll have a better sense of it next week. But London feels like it's enough of there's enough institutional knowledge built up there for those games, and that stadium is kind of built for NFL games anyway at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. So it's maybe a little bit less of an issue there, but they had to get the field fixed there a couple of years ago after the turf issues in 2022. And it's just, there's enough things that happen that if you're the NFL trying to tell teams, hey, we want you to do more of these, everybody needs to sign up for marketing rights. People may do more of these back-to-back trips. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if the NFL is rooting for the Vikings next week so that they don't have to, when everybody asks the Vikings, hey, how was this? Well, we lost 2 games and it screwed our season up. If you're doing more of these things, you have to make it competitively palatable for teams to say, yes, let's go do more of this. So I think all of that stuff is there were just enough hiccups today where it's like, even if the experience was good and people praise the experience overall, and I think it was overall a good experience, but you have to figure those things out. Otherwise these games lose some competitive balance.
Yeah, it did seem football wise. It seemed the fans were into it. It seemed like the crowd, the environment was certainly good. You mentioned it being kind of obviously more of a actual road environment, which struck me because the first games in London, or certainly the first years in London, and even still sometimes those crowds can be quite neutral and just not into it or not following it along as much. And I do know that the Vikings logistical people, the people who handle all the months of planning that go into these trips, have talked about how London has gotten so much easier because the people over there now understand how to book and intake a 200-person travel party for an NFL team. And so it's not just the stuff on game day that we're talking about, because the game is what matters, obviously. That's the stuff that matters. But there's so much stuff behind the scenes that go into it, where, Ben, you remember covering practice on a cow pasture in London because they just didn't have much set up in terms of their training facilities or the fields. And now they've got, the NFL sets stuff up ahead of time where they've got these training setups where the fields they know are going to be in condition that's proper for them to practice on. And obviously they hope play on, but Croke Park seems to deliver kind of mixed results. I could see why Rodgers would say it's pristine, because transitioning back to the game, DK Metcalf had no problem cutting and running on a couple of those passes.
No, he did not. I mean, the back shoulder was like, I mean, how many yards have we seen Aaron Rodgers in his career get off of that play? I mean, where Metcalf's spinning in the air to catch the ball, it's like, that guy could be wearing number 17 in green and gold, and you would have fooled me. I mean, it looked exactly like how many times we've seen that, Devontae Adams, Jordy Nelson, whoever. It was that one, and then the one where he danced out of traffic and then got the luck of the Irish on the fumble that bounced right back to Broderick Jones. But his ability to get through, I mean, that looked like vintage Rodgers. And then I thought the throw to Metcalf for the touchdown, the quick strike over the middle, and we've seen him do that a lot over the years too. But it did feel like if this is the last time, and he said, I feel like I'm teeing off on hole 18 of my career. If this is really it, there were some moments to this one that felt like things that Leslie Frazier and Mike Zimmer and probably even Brad Childress would have said, yep, I've been through that before.
It's why, in spite of everything, the Vikings talked about bringing him in for that 18th hole.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I had a couple conversations with Vikings people this week that said, I think he is going to be out to prove a point in this one. And, because Rodgers wanted to be in Minnesota. There's no doubt about that. And the Vikings had the conversations with him, at least to think through it, but then decided, we don't want to go down this road. We want to kind of stick with JJ McCarthy as the starter. In the end, that's the decision they make. But I think there probably was a little bit, and we all know that Aaron Rodgers is famously beholden to that chip on his shoulder. So, there could have been a little bit of that there today, but he got asked about it after the game, and that was more from Irish reporters, I think, saying in the context of all of your rivalries with the Vikings over the years in Green Bay. But he said, I wanted to beat him. And I said, I'll leave it at that. And then it came back around later and he said, well, the Vikings are not the Packers' true rival. It's the Bears, but the Vikings fans and Packers fans don't like each other. So it spices it up that way. And he said, it's been great battles with Minnesota, probably more competitive than it's been with the Bears. But so some of that stuff came up. But the first comment he made about, I wanted to beat him, I'll leave it at that. It's like, on what basis are you saying this cryptically, Aaron? It just sort of made me wonder how much of that was in the back of his mind, too. I'm sure, knowing the way he tends to fuel himself off of real or perceived grievances, I wouldn't be surprised if it was on his mind.
And he goes 18 of 22 for 200 yards and a touchdown, Emily. He looked pretty good.
Yeah, well, and I was going to add that, looking through some of the photos from this game, because I was going and pulling stuff for some of the Instagram content, there's a few photos from after the game where he looks quite victorious, in a way that just looking at it, you can feel like there's a little bit more than, we just won on a last minute play in Dublin. There's an energy to
that Aaron Rodgers smirk, that smug look we've all seen. Yep.
We'll overlay it here in the video. But yeah, getting more into a little bit of the game, and obviously we just finished up week 4 of the season. What do we feel like are the trends that we're starting to see emerge with this team? I mean, third down conversion percentage was a big talking point on the broadcast for obvious reasons throughout the game. Injuries is becoming an unfortunate trend for this game. The run defense, what's jumped out to each of you the most through these first 4 weeks collectively that maybe we saw, especially in today's game?
Yeah, Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think the third downs, it came up a little bit after the game too, but on third and longs, they have not been good this year. And I'm trying to remember what the number was, but it's like 1 for 1 for 27 is kind of what's on my mind. It's something like that where it's well under 10% of those. And that's not a way that anybody wants to live in general. But when you have an offensive line that has had new pieces every week, when you've had a receiver suspended for the first 3 games of the season, you lack a lot of the resources to convert those consistently. And I think that makes it awfully difficult to try to sustain an offense.
Yeah, third downs have been tough for them. I think Carson Wentz started this game off looking like, a little bit like he did in the first game. And you're thinking that there's going to be some of the same stuff from him. It really sustained drives, had first downs in every drive, and then it kind of fell apart there after halftime. And this was a 1-score game. It was 14-6 there in the third quarter. And for Wentz to do what he did despite the injuries up front, you could just tell it just became too much. I don't know how much you can take away from this game specifically, but he took some sacks early. The one that really stuck out to me, he left Justin Jefferson wide open. That was a replay the broadcast did catch. And then there were a couple other times that You could just tell the key decision-making in those moments was up and down, but those injuries are going to really make it look worse in the second half, and it did. And I thought their ability to pair together 2 touchdown drives there on the back end was impressive. I think that is what is going to give O'Connell hope if JJ McCarthy needs one more week. And the broadcast, I can't remember the reporter, but the sideline reporter had mentioned on the broadcast that JJ McCarthy, if able, could come back and run the second team offense in practices this week, which would indicate that Carson Wentz going into the game already had a leg up to be the starter going into next week as well. So I don't know if they're going to make some kind of seismic change unless JJ McCarthy just shows that he's 100% fully ready and healthy.
Yeah, Jamie Erdahl said that JJ would lead the scout team if they felt that he was ready to be back in practice this week, kind of as a ramp up, which was interesting because she said that both before the game and then I think repeated it during the actual game broadcast.
Well, and here's the other question, and this is a little more of a big picture discussion, but they're 2-2 now, and this was supposed to be the easier part of the schedule. So if they lose next week, I'm not saying they're going to, but just say for the sake of argument that they do, if they lose and they're 2-3 going to the bye, knowing what comes out of the bye, where it's Eagles at Chargers Thursday night, at Lions, Ravens at home, that's your 4. And then you get the Bears, and then it's at Packers, at Seahawks, Commanders at home, I believe. This season, this question of, is it about developing JJ McCarthy or is it about winning with this group of veteran players? If they're not careful here, we could be trending toward this is about developing JJ McCarthy, because it's tough to get back into a playoff race. I mean, you never know. And you don't want to sit here and say, well, those 4 games are all going to be losses given, where they're at. There's a lot of things can change. A lot of things can change for the Vikings, and a lot of things can change for the teams they're playing. But the 4 teams they play after the bye are all teams with accomplished quarterbacks and players, and 3 of them at least. I think probably 4. I think Chargers have been pretty good defensively too, but those are good pass rushes they're going to face in a lot of those cases. So they're not going to be teams that you expect to just be terribly likely to trip over a banana peel and all of a sudden not be any good. They're going to be tough outs no matter what. And it does, it makes next week's game even more important because they've already lost to the Falcons at home and you lose to the Steelers in a neutral environment. In a game that they could have won, it makes it harder to get where you want to go if those are the games you're giving back.
Well, and specifically looking at the issues they've had with the pass rush and the sacks and the state of the offensive line, you also have Myles Garrett to worry about next week, who is not easy on them at all and was already a concern before you realize that Ryan Kelly is almost certainly not going to play next week at this point. They're still down Donovan Jackson, and they're going to be down Brian O'Neill.
Yeah, Ben, that's what I was going to ask you. If you're getting to the point where you're losing games and you're developing the young guy, developing him behind what? And if it's going to be a patchwork line, Kevin O'Connell loves to talk about ruining quarterbacks. That might be a quick way to ruin one if it's behind a group that shouldn't be be a starting 5 in the NFL.
It's a great point. I mean, because if I think about the first or most vivid example I can think of a team ruining a quarterback, it's David Carr with the expansion Texans in 2002, where he was the first pick in the draft. They start him right away, and the offensive line is terrible, and he gets sacked like 82 times, I think it was, or something like that. That type of a season, there are different ways to do it, but having a quarterback like that have to run for their lives, and then you just start kind of seeing ghosts even when you don't have to do it, it can mess up a lot of things. So yeah, it's a good point in the sense, and it's what they were hoping to avoid with this. I mean, they wanted as many veterans in front of JJ McCarthy as they could possibly get, so that all he had to worry about is, if I do my job, I'm around so many people that know what they're doing that it'll be fine. It'll be kind of turnkey. And injuries have a way of changing all of that. I mean, it's the nature of the beast. It's not the only time it's happened in the history of the NFL, and it'll happen again. But yeah, it does change some of the calculus there. There's no doubt about it. I think that's a good point, that that could be a factor in what you're talking about the rest of the season looking like.
And go ahead, Emily.
I was going to say, do we think they moved to acquire someone? Like, if Brian O'Neill is going to be a long-term injury, do we think they look at bringing someone else in? Obviously, they brought in Cam Robinson last year when Christian Darrisaw was injured. Darrisaw's back now, which is great for them and looked great last week with the full line. But when you have this many other guys down, it didn't feel like it made that big of a difference.
It would tell us a lot about how they feel if they did make a move, because we know how Sam Darnold was playing at that point. And by that point, you knew, okay, you've got something here with Darnold. You don't know what you've got at quarterback right now. It feels like the Vikings offense every week is just this mystery box of seeing what you get to open.
Yeah, it really has been. You're right. I mean, it's the fourth quarter comeback, and then it's the Falcons game. It's the defense made a big show in that game too, but it's Jordan Mason running for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then it's what happened today. So yeah, it is hard to know. It's hard to see a sustainable, repeatable trend with it right now. And the other thing to think about there is they have a lot of salary cap questions next year. I mean, Ryan Kelly was going to be a salary cap question even if he was healthy. I think all of that starts to get to be a bigger question as we go forward. But they probably are in a spot where they'd like to roll as much of that cap space into next year as they could. And it's not going to preclude them from doing something if they see something they want to do. But they also, I think, want to keep their draft picks because they have to hit on some of those here. And they're in a position where they'll have a good supply of them, a good surplus of them next year. So, I mean, we are getting very far afield here, and I can already hear everybody probably telling us, hey, you guys are giving up on the season. We're not, but you can see the fork in the road from here, I think. And, some of the way that the head coach is talking about all 11, I mean, a lot of it, you heard it again today, all 11 doing their jobs. I think there's a little bit of a call in there of, okay, veteran players, it's time to, do what you're being asked to do, because we can't afford, I mean, the tackling was an issue again today too on the defensive side of it. We can't afford these kinds of slip-ups if you have injuries and changes at quarterback somewhat because of injury too.
Yeah, Ben, the last thing I wanted to ask you about was just that defense big picture wise. Like, that was supposed to be the sustaining thing, and I think they largely kept them in the game until some short fields set up 10 points there, I think, in the second half. But what did you make of their performance watching it in person? What did players have to say about it? Because it just seemed like they didn't get the game-changing plays. All their game-changing plays defensively have been kind of contained into one of their 4 games so far.
Yeah, and I suppose by one player in particular who had another one today, albeit on special teams.
That's true. That's true.
Blocked field goal. I mean, that was like a swat. I mean, that was like a volleyball player blocking a shot at the net and just went straight down. Josh Metellus talked about it a little bit afterwards, and Jonathan Grenard too. There was a lot of frustration from both of them. Metellus said, we have a certain standard we play at, and this, you can point to all these things, but we expect a lot more out of ourselves than this. And tackling was, I mean, he called it out. He said, we can't be missing this many tackles. That is something that they highlighted a number of times in press conferences afterwards. And yeah, I thought they were not as dynamic getting to the quarterback as I thought they would be. I mean, they put a lot of heat on Rodgers last year, and he really wasn't touched much today. And this is not a good offensive line that the Steelers typically have in front of him. He did a good job of getting rid of the ball. I mean, I think he made a lot of quick throws, knowing that you can do that against the zone coverages and all those kinds of things. But, he did have the one against Jeff Okudah. The back shoulder throw was in man coverage, and he beat that too. So I think some of it was Rodgers having kind of a turn back the clock moment in some, on a few different plays. But I also thought, I think they miss Andrew Van Ginkel. I mean, I think a lot of what they do when you have the full complement is just better. And I think him not being out there today was a factor. And I mean, they look, even though it was only 8 plays, he had 2 sacks in those 8 plays last week. And they look different when they have him at full strength too.
Yeah, they've had Van Ginkel for 1 game and 8 plays in that Bengals game, and then Blake Cashman for just 1 game too, before he got hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and what Van Ginkel was dealing with this week, at least from what we heard from O'Connell on Wednesday, back here stateside, was that it was just like residual soreness from his neck injury that he'd been dealing with in training camp. So if it's soreness, how quickly, like, is he back next week? And then they just see if he's sore again after next Sunday's game. Do they give him a little extra time, hoping that next time he does play, he doesn't get sore? Like, I just can't imagine that's a scenario that resolves itself quickly. And if he was sore enough after only 8 snaps of play that they felt like he needed to miss another week, like that doesn't feel great.
Yeah, Emily.
O'Connell,
go ahead, Ben.
Just quickly, O'Connell talked about it with us in Dublin on, what day is it? It's Good Friday. Days don't mean anything right now. I don't know what time it is. It's dinner time here. He said he thought Van Ginkel would be back next week, but to your point, Emily, it's like, it's hard to say that, it's going to be fine when, he missed 3.5 weeks of training camp with this, and has now only played 8 snaps. Some of that's a concussion too, but has only played the 8 snaps to this point. So yeah, I think it's a fair thing to wonder about until we see him back out there consistently.
Yeah, the last ambiguous neck injury around the Vikings turned out to be a herniated disc that required surgery and quite a bit of time away. I'm not saying that this is what this is, but if you're ambiguous around a neck injury, you shouldn't get a benefit of a doubt that it's going to be anything good. So we'll see. I don't know. Yeah, Ben, if he said Van Ginkel should be back next week, that's a great sign. I remember with Danielle Hunter, it was all about the numbness that resonated down his shoulders and into his arms. And who knows what Van Ginkel's dealing with. But if it's anything at all with a pinched nerve, that can kind of come and go and be a factor for obviously an extended period of time.
Yeah, it can. I mean, and we don't know the details exactly of what it is, but it's just one of those things that, I mean, I think are certain body parts that you're just like, okay, this is probably it's one of those things you just, your antenna goes up a little more because it's, there are certain things that are easier to work around than others. And I don't know that I would put neck as one that you work around a whole lot. Which may explain also why they're being cautious with it too.
For sure.
We're going a bit longer than we normally do on postgame, but I do want to hit a couple more things just quickly before we finish up. I thought Jordan Addison had a pretty strong debut game for the season. Obviously makes the big catch that also almost went for a touchdown, similar to Jefferson's. He gets stopped. They do end up scoring there. Xavier Scott was the one that scored that touchdown. Great foot awareness, like just awareness of where he was body position wise in that end zone. And then, Jordan Addison. And, I was going to say positive injury news, just trying to leave the listeners on an uphill note here, is that fullback CJ Ham will be eligible to come off IR this week. And it does seem like they are going to take him off and make him eligible to return. And so maybe that, I don't know how much that helps the O-line issues, but having someone else there to maybe help assist with some blocking in the form of Ham could ease things slightly.
Yeah, and I was impressed by Xavier Scott too, Ben. I don't know what he looked like in person, but man, they had him out in that Aaron Jones role, catching passes out wide.
That's 100% what they were doing. I mean, it was a lot of the things they would want to do with Aaron Jones, and he's obviously a converted receiver, so you have some of those things that you can do with him. But yeah, the catch in the back of the end zone, a leaping grab and a toe stand. I initially thought, and the fans in the stadium were booing it when they called it a touchdown, and they booed it when they saw it in a replay. But then when they zoomed in, you could see he got his feet down. And I mean, it was a heck of a catch. I mean, to the point where most of the stadium didn't believe he'd done it. So yeah, that was awfully impressive. And, it's another weapon for them when they kind of need people to step into some of those roles. I thought, Justin Jefferson was much more of a factor today. They definitely were trying to get him involved and had opportunities to do it. But yes, kind of a busted coverage on the Addison throw. But, one thing we saw from Carson Wentz today a little bit too, he was making more throws on the move today. And some of them seemed a little gunslinger-ish, but the Addison one, it's a busted coverage. He says, I'm going to take the shot. And there were a couple other times where he made throws. I think the one to Jefferson that Jefferson slipped was kind of one of those where he's moving too. So if you have receivers that can separate, and there are some of those extended plays, maybe that could be something they get some chunks off of it as well. They did a better job, especially when they were making the comeback, when you need those, because you're fighting the score and the time, fighting the clock, and turns out more ways than one today. But you need chunks to be able to make that type of a comeback. And obviously the one that Addison had was the big one that almost cost him when they couldn't punch the ball in until fourth down. But to set that up, that changed the whole thing and made it possible to have a comeback.
Yeah, this game, it felt like, obviously they lost, but it did feel like we saw some of the flashiest offensive plays that we've seen this season, like even including the fourth quarter comeback against the Bears, which felt a little bit more nose to the ground, like just kind of dig it out. Like they got some big splashy plays here today. So obviously they don't want the extra tally in the loss column, but to come back near the end, like it's going to be interesting to see how the next few weeks progress, because there continue to be flashes of them being able to put this together. It's just they cannot do it consistently enough to get through the middle two quarters of the game. Like with Carson, they've looked better in the first quarter, and then obviously the fourth quarter was strong this game. He was replaced by Max Brosmer in last game's fourth quarter, but
fourth quarter was garbage.
Those middle two quarters, they can't do anything with, besides have Will Reichard kick a fourth straight pre-halftime field goal.
Yeah, it's some of that consistency, like you talk about, is not there. And that's where we bring up, the Browns are not world beaters, but they have enough accomplished defensive players that it's going to be a challenge. And then that stretch after the bye, it's just, we keep coming back to it because they are going to be tested. You're not going to be able to fake your way through any one of those 4 games where you get a few things go right, a couple bounces go your way. You're going to have to do a lot of things really well to win those. And when Kevin O'Connell keeps talking about execution of all 11, if you don't have it in those games, I think they're going to pay for it. So, that's where a lot of these things that they continue to talk about have to get fixed pretty quickly.
Well, the Chargers lost Joe Alt, who was carted to the locker room with an ankle injury. So the attrition is going to hit everybody, but the Vikings need to hope that they are at least starting a majority of starters on their offensive line, not 2 of 5 like they got down to.
They may have Donovan Jackson back by that point too, but Brian Kelly thing that's one to keep watching.
For sure. Ben, as you mentioned, you'll be coming back stateside, done with your overseas trip. Andrew will be over there. We will all catch up at some point, probably midweek while Andrew's over there. And then again, post-game next week when, I don't know, we might have a clearer picture, or the picture might be just as muddied heading out into the bye week and beyond. Who knows?
Yeah, we are making the shift change tomorrow. I'm flying home from Dublin, and Andrew is, I think, coming over to London on Tuesday, which is the next time we will hear from Kevin O'Connell on Tuesday. And then MRI results will be kind of the story tomorrow when we're probably when I'm crossing the pond or, lay over in Amsterdam or something. I lay over in Amsterdam tomorrow and then back in the States tomorrow evening. So, yeah, lots of moving parts for us. We're not as many as the Vikings offensive line, but we're a little bit of a beat writer by committee thing these next couple of weeks here too. So, I've got what I think will be my last Guinness of the week waiting for me. When I had to pop away here was to get room service. So
I was wondering if that's what that was.
Yep, I was like, I could still try to go find something, but it's 10 o'clock here and I still got to write the game story. So it's like I got one more fish and chips and one more Guinness for the road. I had somebody tell me the Guinness is better over here. I don't know why exactly they would. Well, I think they brew it. I think all of the worldwide stuff they brew here, so it's probably just fresher. It is better over here. I'm not typically the biggest Guinness guy in the world, but Guinness in Ireland is it's like champagne in France, I suppose.
That's good. Well, Ben, enjoy your final Guinness of your trip. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we will be talking with you again soon.
I should probably wait to drink that until I write the game story. I just thought of that. Yeah, we'll see how it goes.